started. If you are the host, 4 digits, we will now connect you to your call. There are 2 attendees in this conference. The host has joined the conference.
We have Alderwoman Wilhelm, Chief Liven, and Dan Mayer.
Hello?
Hello, Alderwoman.
Hello? Yeah, is there any live streaming going on?
Yes. Hold your horses, it's coming.
All right, so the answer is yes.
And that's on the agenda for tonight for council authorization, as we discussed over there. He was doing that as a test of some sort.
You live, Kelly?
What's that?
You live?
Not yet.
Oh. Okay.
Okay. So the first thing on the agenda tonight is swearing in us, so that we don't get sworn in, we don't have to do it. That's you.
Do you swear you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin, and will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of mayor of the city of Franklin to the best of your ability, so help you God?
I do.
Alderwoman Wilhelm has already been personally sworn in, so the next is Alderman Kennedy. Do you swear you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin, and will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of Alderwoman to the best of your ability, so help you God?
I will.
And I shake your hand.
Do you swear you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin, and will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of Alderman to the best of your abilities?
I do.
How many times have we done this?
Well, yours is a little bit different, so I only memorize yours once every 4 years.
That's good, because I'm a little different too, so.
Do you swear you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin, and will administer justice without respect to persons, and will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of municipal judge to the best of your ability, so help you God?
I will.
Congratulations.
Without objection, without objections, let's move to item G1.
Call to order.
Oh, yeah. I call to order the April 21st Common Council meeting. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Olson,
Here.
Alderman Dandria,
Here.
Alderman Mayor,
Here.
Alderwoman Wilhelm,
Here.
Alderwoman Hanneman,
Here.
Alderman Barber,
Here.
Alderman Nelson.
Here. We have a quorum. Please rise, join the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, without objection, we'll move to item G1, which is a resolution to amend a resolution ratification of a proclamation on a public health emergency, which will allow us to transmit this meeting via electronic means. Is there a motion to adopt the
So
resolution?
moved.
Second.
Discussion on the motion? Alderman Nelson.
Yeah, one of the things that maybe I'm not seeing it in this document is my concern that this information is brought up immediately to the first responders, excuse me.
No,
I want to go back to this one thing. I want to strike the date of June 1st, whatever the state's gonna put as the implementation date. My fault. So instead of June
I have a
1st,
question.
on page 21, it says, from this date here up to June 1st, I want to, because this thing is too fluid, so I figured we'd reword that to get rid of June 1, just put the time frame that the state adopts.
Mr. City Attorney.
This local emergency declaration applicable to the city by the Common Council only does a few things as opposed to what the state emergency orders do. And those few things include authorizing the health emergency manager, fire department chief, as well as the public health officer to undertake what they need. And it also authorizes the ability of the public to listen and view the meetings. And if this proclamation, resolution amendment is approved, also to participate by way of communication for citizen comment period and public hearing notices. When this was put together, the thought was with regard to the timing, all things considered, this doesn't say you cannot open or any of those things. It just authorizes this virtual meeting and participation process for another 40 days.
So then, Counselor, you're okay with the date of June 1st in there?
Yes,
Okay,
and because it's,
that's fine.
doesn't include all the terms and provisions of the state orders.
Good. Alderman Wilhelm.
Well, there's a huge delay on the video and, what's going on this end with the voice. So everything's way out of whack on my end. I don't know how the other aldermen are seeing it.
My advice to you is listen to the audio, do not look at the video. There's nothing we can do about the video.
Okay, so, go ahead. I'll give the floor.
Alderman Mayor.
It doesn't mention specifically council members to listen to the meetings. Are we considered with the public? It gives the public the ability to listen online or by phone, but it doesn't mention council members.
That was previous action. That was done in previous action.
Okay, so that
Can you
continues on.
clarify which item we're on?
G1.
Oh, okay, what happened to citizen comment period?
We're gonna go back to that because let's, we've got a motion on the floor. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we're gonna move back now to citizens' comment period. Any citizen wishing to speak on any matter?
Mayor, I have a request from a citizen.
Judge Clements first, and then Alderman Wilhelm.
Fred Clements, 9399 South Cobblestone Way, Unit A, Franklin. I have 4 things to say. 2 of them are going to be pretty brief, so I'll just go through those very quickly. First of all, congratulations to all those who were elected or re-elected. As you know, service to the community is one of the most important things a person could ever do in their life. I know all of you take this job very, very seriously. You put in a lot of time and hours far beyond what you get compensated for. So I'd like to thank all of you for being willing to do this and take on the responsibilities. Thank you all. Second, I'd like to thank former Alderman Steve Taylor for his years of service to the community. Now that he's no longer Alderman, I'd like to congratulate him on that. The most important thing I have to say, though, is that we had an election a couple weeks ago that was probably unprecedented, not just in the state of Wisconsin, but perhaps in the entire United States, in that we had up until a week, 10 days, some cases 2 or 3 days before the election, uncertainty as to whether the election was actually going to occur, uncertainty as to who was going to administer it, uncertainty about dates on the absentee ballots and that kind of thing. And the 2 things that struck me out of that whole experience is how lucky we are to have the city clerk that we have.
Amen.
And how lucky we are and how lucky we are to have the number of poll workers, and that's in large part thanks to Sandy as well, because she has to recruit these people, and many of the people are a bit older, and many of them are understandably very cautious and very concerned about safety and that type of thing, for which I certainly don't blame them. And again, I think Sandy did a magnificent job of overseeing that and setting that all up, and I just, as I said a moment ago, I'll just repeat myself, we are so blessed and so lucky to have the city clerk that we do. The final thing is, and I'm going to try and make this kind of quick, and I probably will get moans and groans, but I'm going to say it anyways. I was first elected to public office in 1990 as mayor, and my daughter at that time, Julianne, was 6 years old. And my wife heard Julianne telling some of the neighborhood kids that she was playing with, you know, I'm the mayor's daughter. My dad is the mayor, so I'm the mayor's daughter. I'm the mayor's daughter. So Joanne brought Julianne in and said, you know, Julianne, nothing has changed. You're still just Julianne Clements. I don't want to hear these airs of you're the mayor's daughter and all that. Nothing's different. You're still just plain Julianne Clements. Got it? Got it. So 2 or 3 days after that, Julianne and I are grocery shopping at the old Sentry on 76 in Watson, and a gentleman comes up to us and says, Mr. Mayor, I just want to introduce myself and congratulate you on winning and all that. And little girl, I know who you are. You're the mayor's daughter, aren't you? And Julianne looked up at him and said, you know, I thought I was too, but my mom says I'm not. So needless to say, that person moved to Oak Creek a couple weeks later. But so anyways, congratulations to all of you, and let's have a next good session here for the Common Council.
To you too, Judge.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Considine, good evening. I promised Alderman Wilhelm next. Pete, 1 second. Alderman Wilhelm.
Okay, this is from Kristen Kurtz at 6768 South 35th Street regarding item G5. I request the commission vote against the resolution. Unless the city can demonstrate an appreciable harm in failing to adopt the resolution, I don't see how the current timeline is of a detriment to the city's residents. In the alternative, I request this item be tabled and the city's health department be given 30 days to demonstrate the actual need for such a program. There are thousands of programs and opportunities that exist for the city of Franklin. It does not mean we need them. Thank you. That's the only one I have.
Okay. Mr. Kosovich, good evening.
Good evening. Pete Kosovich, 8170 South 28th Street. I just wanted to stop by and welcome Sherry to the council. I was behind her all the way, and I'm sure she's going to do a good job. And congratulations to you, Mayor Olson, also for getting me elected.
Thank you, Pete.
Certainly the choices were not particularly good. I mean, as far as your opponent, I would never have voted for him.
Thank you, Pete.
So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else? Okay, seeing no one else rise, I will close. Well, first I want to say, Judge Clements' comments were very appropriate about the clerk's office, and I've said this before since the election, but I did have opportunity to see the clerk's office at work, and even as late as, what was it, 8:30, the night before the election, 9 o'clock, when our governor said, election's off by executive order. Sandy did keep her wits about her, as I was uttering some choice words, but Sandy kept her wits about her and said, we're moving forward, and thank God she did. I think our operation was the model for the entire state. Sandy had a plan. She had the safety of our constituents in mind and the poll workers, and all of these dire predictions that we heard were proven to not come true, especially here in Franklin, and we'll hear more about that in 2 seconds. So with that, I will close the citizens' comment period. Thank you for those comments, Phil. Appreciate it very much. I'll close the citizens' comment period. We move on to mayoral announcements, which will be a report from Courtney Day, our health officer, and our incident commander for the COVID-19 pandemic. And Mike, can you grab one of the wireless microphones?
I'll get it. Hit green. Give me green.
All right, good evening. I won't take too much of your time tonight. I'll just go over brief highlights and then take any questions that you have. The numbers I'm going to give, if they're not on the city website at this point, they will be shortly. So these are the most recent numbers for Franklin as of about 5 o'clock this evening. Currently, there are 37 Franklin residents who have tested positive for COVID-19 since March 14th of 2020. Of those 37, 18 of them are still under what we consider active surveillance, meaning that they're still symptomatic and they're still isolated at home. 16 residents have recovered, meaning that they have met the criteria to be released from isolation and are no longer symptomatic or a threat to transmit the disease in the community. We have had 3 deaths, but nothing for the last several weeks. And there have been 291 negative test results in Franklin. So again, these are of the people who have been tested. I understand that their need, or the number in Franklin is probably much larger than that, but we don't know those numbers. We only have the numbers from the testing. The dashboard, as some people have mentioned for Milwaukee County, does show Franklin as having 90 cases. Those include 53 confirmed positive cases at the House of Correction. Those numbers I have pulled out of my daily reporting, since the numbers at the House of Correction will go up and down depending on how the lab results come in, as well as how the House of Corrections filled out the laboratory forms when they were being tested. There is a separate website that the county executive's office has started for positive cases for all correctional facilities within the county. That will have the most up-to-date information that they are seeing through their laboratory. So there is a bit of a delay between their medical staff getting the records and them being entered into our database, and for whatever reason, some of them aren't showing up in the county EOM database. So the most accurate information for House of Corrections, you can go to that county exec page. For the most accurate, up-to-date Franklin-specific cases, I'll continue to do those daily. I have seen some requests on social media to put those House of Correction numbers back into our daily briefing so people don't have to go to 2 sites. So I will include a line in those posts as well, so people don't have to travel to 2 websites. Be happy to take any questions anybody has about anything going on right now.
Before that, it's important to note that we are not responsible for those House of Corrections numbers and the accuracy of those numbers. That's totally up to them.
Yeah, we have 3 staff, 3 of my staff dedicated to helping the House of Corrections, 2 on the staff side of things, the officers. There's a little bit more involved with getting their results and making sure the appropriate health department knows if they need to follow up if anyone tests positive. And then I have one nurse working with their medical staff to make sure the inmates are being triaged, isolated appropriately.
And it's important to note that we technically, although, well, I'll just say that technically we're responsible for those inmates and staff until they get assigned to their home communities. We're technically responsible for their public health needs. I am in the middle of negotiating with the county for reimbursement of the costs of our staff to do this. With 103 inmates and currently four staff, it's occupying a lot of our staff time. And it's not fair to the taxpayers of the city of Franklin to be paying for county services like that. In your packets, there's a report from the Franklin Police Chief, Rick Oliva. He's pleased and I'm pleased, and so is Ms. Day, that the police department continues to be asymptomatic. There are no police officers with the virus. Chief, we're still good at the fire department? Thumbs up, baby, that's what I like to see. Thank you, appreciate that. As I mentioned last meeting, fire department has stepped up big time, and that's about all we want to say about that. Any questions for Ms. Day? Relative response? I will say, Alderman Barber.
Just to say thank you for you and your staff for what you're doing.
Our EOC team did meet yesterday in case the State Supreme Court throws out the Order 28 and there is no, there would be no transition period. And I think we all agreed, there's nothing official yet, but we all agreed that a rollback is more important than a drop dead in terms of how we view transition to an open businesses. I've since had a number of meetings with the area mayors and village presidents. At least on the south side, we all share that opinion. So we're covered. There's no agreements, but we're all covered in the same mindset that if the Supreme Court bails on the governor's orders, there's kind of sort of a plan. So it's not going to be pandemonium. It's not going to be one-off business. And Courtney's had her meetings with health officers, fire chiefs involved in it all the time. McLeod, the police officers, they like me and us are sworn to uphold the law. So we will do that, and that's the name of that game. Questions? So, okay, thank you very much. With that, we'll move on to the business items. Item C is approval of the regular common council meeting minutes of April 6th. Madam Clerk.
There was an amendment. There was an amendment to item G16, which Alderwoman Hanneman had brought, and the amendment has been included in your mailboxes. I'm not sure if there's a new one here, but it will, minutes will be as amended.
Do you know what the amendment was?
The correction, instead of 4,000, there's too many numbers in the,
Item G16 should read $4,082.50.
correct.
Is there a motion to approve with the amendment?
So moved.
Mr. Mayor,
Alderman Mayor?
I was present on the phone, not present in the chambers.
And with that correction? With those two corrections?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of the motion? Well, let's do roll call because we've got phone people.
Alderman Dandria.
Aye.
Alderman Mayor.
Aye.
Alderwoman Wilhelm.
Aye.
Alderwoman Hanneman.
Aye.
Alderman Barber.
Aye.
Alderman Nelson.
Aye.
Motion carries 6 ayes, no noes, no absent, no abstentions. Move on to organizational business. Item 1 is aldermanic appointments. Any request for separate action? Seeing none.
Mayor?
Alderman Willow.
Just that the, term for the quarry is 3 years for the last,
That's correct.
resolution that we adopted, just made those changes.
Thank you very much. The clerk was about to mention that, but great, okay?
Oh, okay, beat her to it. Sorry.
Yeah, you did. Item F is a 3-year term, not a 2-year. Is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Alderman Nelson.
Aye.
Alderman Barber.
Aye.
Alderwoman Hanneman.
Aye.
Alderwoman Wilhelm.
Aye.
Alderman Mayor.
Aye.
Alderman Dandria.
Aye.
Motion carries 6 ayes, no noes, no absent, no abstentions. Move on to item E2, election of the Common Council President. I'll entertain motions from the floor.
Mayor,
Alderman Willow.
I'll nominate Alderman Nelson.
Is there a second? Oh, there's no second needed. Any other nominations? Alderman Barber.
I'd like to nominate, Mark Dandria.
Any other nominations? Is there a motion to close nominations?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so, we'll do slip of paper and the clerk will tally.
Well,
Mayor, can I ask one quick question? Can we have the two candidates, maybe just give a little experience, a little background before they do,
What do you want, 3 minutes?
no, I think a couple of minutes is fine.
Couple of minutes?
Oh, whatever each of us would like to say, and, just to let the other aldermen know, background, qualifications.
All right, since you started, Alderman Nelson.
Okay, well, one of the things that, I think in the last 3 years, I've worked with everybody on this panel, openly, transparently, fairly, and that's how I think we need to continue moving forward. I've, have no problems with Mark. Mark's been in the last 3 years. I worked well with Mark as well. I just would like an opportunity to serve at that capacity, and, look forward to having that opportunity. If we're gonna talk about what I've been, if I wanna bore people, I sit on the same finance committee with Mark, and we have that same glazed over feeling as why Mr. Kichi's here to probably talk about that, but we share a lot of the same interests, but I would like an opportunity to serve the next, term coming up. Thank you.
Mark, Alderman Dandria.
Yes, I've had an opportunity to be common council president for the last 3 years. I've handled some rather adversarial meetings in those past 3 years. Starting from how we had to handle the rock development and the controversy that stemmed from the initial findings of that whole development and how it's moved forward, as well as the background that I bring, the real estate license that I bring, the insurance licenses experience that I bring, as well as the business development background that I bring, being in 30+ years of commercial banking in southeast Wisconsin. So I bring a wide variety of experience that helps aid. I've done a lot of trust, built a lot of trust in the community, as well as served on advisory councils and on boards for Southeastern Wisconsin Alzheimer's Association, as well as I've been a Rotarian for 20+ years, past president, Paul Harris Fellow. I've committed myself to service to the community and Southeastern Wisconsin, and I think the wide variety of skills that I've built up throughout the last 30+ years helps me to enable the common council as well as the current mayor to continue to press on with the message that we want to do for our community.
Okay, so, The clerk's going to, actually, Mr. Morrow's gonna pass out some slips. For those two on the phone, the clerk is going to, Alderman Mayor, you have the clerk's cell phone number?
Yes, I do.
Would you both just text her your choice, please?
Sure.
Well, I think I made my choice knowing when I nominated, so that's pretty public.
Yeah, but it doesn't work that way. You actually have to.
So you want me to,
Text her, please.
all right.
Your Honor, did you ever envision a day when you'd be texting for council president?
Many years ago, I know I shouldn't speak, but many years ago, Tom Taylor and Basil Ryan tied for council president, and I could have broken the tie, I just decided not to. It went like 16 ballots before I finally broke the tie.
You had two of those, Del Seaver too.
Yeah.
We're too old. Mr. City Attorney.
The Del Siebert nomination, secret ballot vote. I actually was in the hospital with emergency surgery starting the afternoon of that meeting, I believe it was, the meeting day. The next morning, I woke up in my hospital bed, and a few minutes later, around 8 a.m., I received a phone call from the then city administrator, James C. Payne. And he said there were 84 tie votes. Is it possible for the mayor to break the tie? And I said, yup. And so he said, oh, okay, thanks. And the next meeting, the vote was taken, and the first vote ended the subject
I
matter.
think you were on morphine at the time, but that's all right.
Madam Clerk.
Alderman Dandria received 4 votes and Alderman Nelson received 2 votes.
Okay, here we go. We did Alderman.
Sorry,
Alderman Nelson received 2 votes, Alderman Dandria received 4. So Alderman Dandria is our council president.
Congratulations, Mark.
Hey, thanks, John.
Well done, Alderman Nelson, thank you. Move on to item G2, project updates for Ballpark Commons. The update is a written update in your packet. Infrastructure is 90% complete. New Perspective Senior Living is about to enter final phase. April 10th is the building inspections, and they're about to go into landscaping, so they're about to do occupancy. Velo Village is on track per their schedule. The office building is 100% leased and occupied. The coffee shop is set to start their build out in mid to late April. So that should be starting soon, so we'll have a coffee shop in town. It's good news. Mosh Performance Center, you can all see, is in the process of being built. Lex Golf, set to start 60 to 90 days. The hotel has been announced. They have a term sheet with a company called NextGen for a Holiday Inn Express. And that's what's going on with Ballpark Commons. And if you have questions, you'll have to send them to Kelly, and she'll get them to Mike Zimmerman.
Hey, Mayor?
Yes, sir. Alderman Mayor.
I see that they are checking all of the employees when they come on the site and they're logging. Might be a good idea for Courtney just to spot check that and offer any advice that she might have for them.
I see her nodding up and down. Thank you, Alderman.
Mayor, did you mention the change
I did not, but Alderman Barber.
That is not, going to be opening in May. They're talking about possibly July now. That came out as an email today.
Let me see. Okay, G3 is request to accept a grant to update to next-gen 911 capabilities for the police dispatch. A motion?
Chief O'Leary's on the line, you can explain.
Thank you, Chief. There's been a motion to accept. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Oh, we have all kinds of seconds.
Alderman Mayor.
All those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion, well, okay, let's do this by roll call. Sorry. Turn your mic on, Mark. There you go.
Aye.
Alderman Dandria.
Aye.
Alderman Mayor.
Aye.
Alderwoman Wilhelm.
Aye.
Alderwoman Hanneman.
Aye.
Alderman Barber.
Aye.
Alderman Nelson.
Aye.
Motion carries, 6 ayes, no noes, no absent, no abstentions. For those watching, this gives us the ability to get accurate location data from cell phones so that you won't need to give your address from a cell phone, among other capabilities.
Thank you.
Good job, Chief, thank you very much. G4, on page 49, motion to allow the Director of Health and Human Services to enter into a 90-day trial contract for the Wisconsin Statewide Health Information Network.
So move option 1.
Is there a second?
Second.
Lots of discussion.
Rick.
Under discussion, Alderman Nelson.
I've got a question. This reverts back to the first thing I was saying earlier. That's probably why it cost me the question, but what I'm looking at here is the first responders. We want to make sure that and if I'm sitting back here and I'm looking at this and I'm reading this, maybe there's a part on here because when I have a health crisis or emergency and our fine paramedic staff is rushing up my driveway on North Cape Road, which is way too long, I want them to know what's going on. No offense, but I don't want after the fact stuff, I want real time stuff. Is somewhere in this that our first responders, firefighters get this information or not?
So what this is, and perhaps I did not the best job of explaining it in my statement, is think of it, is everyone familiar with Epic? It's a medical record system. That is the best comparison I can make to this. It's not real-time data. What this is a mechanism that hospital systems use so that they can see information about a patient if they choose to use a different hospital system. It's used in a variety of ways. It's a fairly large company like Epic. The way public health has used it, Greenfield and Cudahy both are within their 90-day trial of this software. What they're using it for is to assist them with communicable disease investigations. The way that currently, if we receive a reportable illness that we have to follow up on, our current process in Franklin is that we contact the provider to verify the test results, determine what treatment was made, what teaching was given to the actual patient prior to us contacting that patient, so we know what information they already have and what information we can further provide to help them get through the illness and prevent spreading it to other people. In normal times, pre-COVID-19, doctors' offices are busy, and oftentimes it would take nurses several hours or maybe even a day to get back to us with that information, delaying our response and delaying our ability to mitigate the disease spreading in the community by not knowing all of the information. Having an agreement with this particular company allows us to look at the physician notes for that day rather than having to rely on an individual to call us back to give us that information. It's not a system that is meant for everybody in the city to have. It would be specific to the health department and not even all of the health department, only those individuals doing the communicable disease investigation, which currently is 4 staff plus myself. And the data would be confidential and HIPAA protected, just like it would be if a doctor faxed us the results on our fax machine or called us back to give us that information. There is no need or reason for us to be looking at patient records that are unrelated to the disease and the date of service that is in question.
But you could. I know there's not a need, but you could. If you had that rogue employee that decided
okay,
to
sure.
do
I
it,
mean,
they could-
yes, and never say never. Exactly, you're right. But that's true of records anywhere, yes.
Alderman Barb. Waiting for Alderman.
I received a call from a resident today who had been told that his medical records or her medical records would be released to the public and people would know about him or her and their medical history. So I don't know where that rumor came from, but I am assuming that they're still protected under the same rules that PDMP and HIPAA provide, and that is not going to change at all. I mean, even HIPAA has some exceptions to what you're capable of doing with that, but those protections are in place for everybody, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Any and all health information that we receive is protected information based on the Privacy Rule 45-164.12, which talks about public health access to records. To Alderman Nelson's point, and some of the other questions that I've received as well, yes, I mean, I can't say that there isn't, there couldn't possibly be a rogue employee that might want to look something up. I do not know without talking to the software company if there's a way to curtail that. I do not know. Those are discussions that I can have with them as they're setting the program up. I know that Cudahy and Greenfield have been using the program for about 2 months and have not reported any issues with that.
Alderman David.
I've got tracking programs for. I've
I've
got tracking programs just for my simple business that I operate. I'm sure that there's going to be login access and time dating of anyone that would get in. So Courtney, you'd have an access code, I'm sure, and another staff member will have a different access code. So the acquiring that data will be one thing, and you'll be able to trace it to that individual. Now, granted, who had it and then where the leak came from are two different things. But if multiple people had it or just one person had it, you should be able to trace where who had it and then do your research from there. Similar to what I have internally with my employees, I'm sure there is going to be something, or you could work with IT to come up with something as well.
Yeah, and also the information we would be receiving is not anything that we wouldn't normally be receiving through another channel. Like I said, whether it be by phone, by fax, that would be coming to us. This is a tool that would speed up and expedite our process to be able to track and follow up on diseases faster. The 90-day free trial was offered to us in light of what is going on right now with COVID to sort of speed up our investigations on that front with physician offices being so taxed. Normally I would not have brought this forward. There is a cost to it in general, so I thought the 90-day free trial would be a good way for us to see if this software would be a useful tool and worth the cost for us to look into going further. I understand the concerns and will accept whatever vote you have. It doesn't change necessarily how we do our investigations. This would just make things a little bit faster for us.
Rest assured that we've hired very professional and trained staff who knows their jobs very well and who are extremely trustworthy individuals. And we trust them with our lives, and we should trust them with our information, and they are very trustworthy individuals, and they know their responsibilities. So Alderwoman Hammond. So far, good.
Following up on the mayor's comment about being well-trained, I'm just wondering how long it will take to get employees trained in this system and how many employees you'll be training, and if that's going to incur any other overtime costs over and above what you already have planned.
No overtime costs. We're looking to do this in conjunction with Hales Corners and Greendale, so the training would be done in conjunction with those to health departments as well, just to help the Wishin staff out as part of sort of the olive branch of them allowing us to have this 90-day free trial. It's a one-day training, and then as I said, for staff on our end, I have 4 staff that do those investigations, and then I would also ask for access for myself just from the department director perspective.
Alderman Denver?
Mayor?
Just one follow-up
Mark
question.
first, then you, Chris.
Courtney, you talked about cost. We fall in love with this product. Do we have any idea what it will cost in the future?
Right now, it is approximately $3,500 a year. We would offset that cost with our emergency preparedness grant and our communicable disease grants.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Wilhelm?
On the cost issue, the free 90 days then becomes another $1,500 on top of the $3,500. So you get it free, but if you sign up, then you have to pay for that free time. That increases the cost a little bit. So I noticed quite a few things in here, and this would have been a great document for Mark Roberta to go over, because there's a lot of things in here that participant safeguard checklist, and that you shall adopt and maintain the reasonable security precautions. Do we have those security precautions already written in place? Also the training of all authorized users for the confidentiality requirements in addition to just the use of it. And then, do we plan on funding this in the future? I guess is a question that we have not discussed. But I guess I'd like to know if there's a way for people to opt out. What I'm hearing from most people I've talked to is they're fine with their physicians having access to all of their records between hospital and laboratory and other physicians, but they're less interested in having government have access to their private information. The only opt-out form I was able to find is opting out of the entire system. Do we have a method that if people want to opt out, having government have access to private health care?
I can answer that a little bit. I referenced the HIPAA privacy rule earlier. Public health is specifically carved out in that as a healthcare entity. Specifically, it says healthcare providers may disclose without individual authorization protected health information to public health authorities authorized by law to collect or receive such information for the purpose of preventing or controlling disease, injury, or disability, including but not limited to the reporting of disease, injury, vital events such as birth and death, and conduct public health surveillance. So again, it's covered under the privacy law as well as state law and city ordinance that we are allowed to access that information for public health, for mitigating the spread of communicable disease. There are specific illnesses that we are tasked with following up on, and those would be the only illnesses that we would be looking into records for, and only for the dates of service of the actual lab tests that we receive.
Okay, so Courtney, can you go through a procedure? I'm familiar with the language used in the recording, the CDC, and everything we already have access to. So typically, the lab gets the results, and the lab has to report it to the doctor and the CDC, and then the CDC sends the city of Franklin those results. So you have them, sometimes I've seen that you have them faster than the doctor's office gets back to the patient. So I'm not understanding how this will actually increase your accuracy. So you said it's going to ensure test results are accurate. Tell me how it would ensure that test results are accurate.
So there are certain communicable diseases where a lab could be a potential positive or a confirmed positive. It could be still pending, depending on if it's a culture or a different type of medium that's used. Oftentimes lab reports, when they come to us, do not indicate that. So we will have to call to find out if this is the final lab result or if it's just a preliminary result. So that's one example. Another example is, you're right, sometimes we do receive the lab results faster than the doctor's office does, and it is our practice, since we are not physicians, we don't want to be the person to call and tell a patient what their lab results are, so we always circle back with the provider to make sure they've seen the results and make sure that they are accurate and find out what they've talked to the patient about before we do end up calling them.
Alderwoman, next level of question is, although interesting, a little deep for the subject item. So, do you have something?
Well, I think it's important to lay out and explain a scenario on how you would use this related to COVID, because that's the issue that's really brought this forward right now. Although, you know, there are other communicable diseases. But just walk us through, so for the people who are online listening can understand what the process, your process would be in this, from the time the person walks into their doctor's office to the time you need to access.
Yeah, so specific to COVID, there are excellent examples. So a lot of times what happens, the individual will go to their doctor's office and they will get tested. Test results, depending on where the test is happening, take anywhere from 24 to 72, sometimes even a week to come back to us. We'll receive notification that an individual was tested, but the results aren't there. So we'll need to find out from the physician exactly what was going on, why were they tested, and try to get as much information as we can, and then we'll call the actual patient that was tested. What was happening early on, and is still happening in some instances, individuals were going through the drive-out testing and they were having a swab done, but because there was no physician or anybody indicating what their next steps were, those individuals didn't know that they needed to stay home. So they were going back to work symptomatic and spreading illness. So when we would get those indications that people were tested, we were calling physician offices trying to figure out who did the test and why they were tested, because a lot of times we weren't getting complete information, and it was taking a while, understandably, to get a response from them because they were so overwhelmed. So in that instance, it would have helped us to be able to see the notes for that person when they came in, to understand the scenario of what was going on, and then we could have called the patient right away. So that's an example in COVID. So right now, again, like I said, we're still getting notification that people were tested, and it's incomplete what's going on and what their circumstance is. Also for monitoring of people who are inpatient, we're still having to monitor them for symptoms to determine when they can be released from isolation. So rather than have to call every day and find a floor nurse to take some time to let us know what their vitals were that day, temperature, are they still coughing, we would be able to see that on this record by looking at that date for what their vital signs were that morning.
And then what would you do with that? I mean, what role do you play in having access to someone's temperature and vitals?
Okay, so that is key to letting them be released from isolation back into general populace. So the criteria to be released from isolation is 7 days since symptom onset, plus at least 72 hours fever-free and improving respiratory conditions. So for some of the individuals who are hospitalized, they may be hospitalized for longer than that duration, and they may be able to come off of isolation precautions.
So is it your role that you have to, as the health department, give that final release approval, or is that the doctor? Who gives the final release approval?
Release from isolation is with the health department.
Okay, that's helpful.
Okay.
But you don't know of any opt-out for the C portion?
In reference to, let me make sure that I'm understanding your question. You're asking, does somebody as a patient have the right to opt out of their data being put into a database that other hospital systems or healthcare providers can see? Is that the question you're asking?
No, she wants to know if they can opt out of having you see that.
Again, the only thing that we would be looking for or asking for is anything related to communicable diseases as specified in the privacy law, And the privacy law does have very severe and strict consequences if you breach HIPAA for any reason. We're in public health, we don't need to know anything other than that. So there are very strict laws and guidelines that prohibit us from looking
I
at
understand
that.
all the laws, but the way people are with government access to private data,
And
the laws aren't really that. It's more about government control of personal information for some people.
absolutely, I understand that sentiment.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor, and it's been
Anyone have a
seconded.
quick point?
Alderman Mayor?
Courtney, as we will be seeing it pretty regularly for the foreseeable future. At some point, maybe like 60 days out from now, could you give us a real brief summary on how this system is working for you and what your intentions will probably be at the end of the 90 days?
Yeah, absolutely. My plan was to come back before we were done with the 90-day trial to present, how it was working for us and if I wanted to move forward. Yes.
Perfect, thanks.
All those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry, I keep doing that to you. Madam Clerk, let's do a roll call, please.
Alderman DeAndrea.
Aye.
Alderman Mayor.
Aye.
Alderwoman Wilhelm.
I'm gonna abstain.
Alderwoman Hanneman.
Aye.
Alderman Barber.
Aye.
Alderman Nelson.
Aye.
Motion carries 5 ayes, no noes, 1 abstention, no absent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Day. Move on to item 5 on page 107, authorizes Franklin to participate in intergovernmental cooperation agreement for joint purchasing for necessary supplies for COVID.
So moved.
Second.
Let's give it to Alderman Mayor, Alderman Barber. All those in favor? No. Madam Clerk?
Good job, Paul.
Alderman Nelson.
Aye.
Alderman Barber.
Aye.
Alderwoman Hanneman.
Aye.
Alderwoman Wilhelm.
Aye.
Alderman Mayor.
Aye.
Alderman DeAndrea.
Aye.
Motion carries 6 ayes, no noes, no absent, no abstentions. One note on that, the county is charging a surcharge on that. So it appears, as usual, whatever we save will be taken back by the county. G6, page 117 is a report on the expenditures currently for COVID-19. Mr. Katzenberg.
So the council approved on March 17th the allocation of $250,000 to assist the city in responding to the public health emergency. Finance has taken upon itself to report to you on a regular basis what the city has spent to date. The details are in the council action sheet on page 117, but through April 15th, the city had spent a little over $109,000 to date on this particular emergency. So we are obviously using the funds that this council has made available, and we'll continue to report to you on a regular basis what's going on.
Currently, there's some CARES Act money at the state that the governor's holding up. We have not applied for CARES money. We're gonna get the state rep to give us the appropriate forms. The county's applying for a whole bunch of CARES money that's being held up by the governor. I hope they get it. Just a reminder to Common Council, those who have projects coming up, the fines and forfeitures money is way down. Ambulance revenues is way down. As you're going to discuss here in another item or two, tipping fees are way down. So let's not come up with any more pet projects this year. Okay. G7, page 119. The mayor comes up with a pet project. Authorization to cover first dollar medical costs for COVID-19 treatment.
So moved for option 1.
This actually probably doesn't cost us anything, hopefully. Alderman Mayor, you made the motion?
Yes, sir.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? No, let's do a roll call, thank you. I keep forgetting, I'm so used to it. This, by the way, is very good for our employees, but I don't expect it will pay out.
Alderman Dandria.
Aye.
Alderman Mayor.
Aye.
Alderwoman Wilhelm.
Aye.
Alderwoman Hanneman.
Aye.
Alderman Barber.
Aye.
Alderman Nelson.
Aye.
Motion carries, 6 ayes, no noes, no absent, no abstentions. G8 on 121, resolution authorizing certain officials to execute a development agreement with Knollwood Legacy Apartments. Alderman Mayor. Dan, you want this one?
Nope.
Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Mr. Morrow.
Notice that you're placing that, I put a small addition, to the, basically put stipulation on building permits, not occupancy permits, to be consistent with all of our other projects in the city.
Madam Clerk.
Is he talking into the microphone?
He is. Mr. City Attorney.
Here.
The recommended motion is on the action sheet, and it does state upon review and acceptance by the city attorney, and my understanding of that condition is that would include changes thought to be required under that review.
Is that your motion, Alderman Dandria?
Yes, it is.
Alderman
Yes.
Barber? All right, Madam Clerk.
Alderman Nelson.
No.
Alderman Barber.
Aye.
Alderwoman Hanneman.
Aye.
Alderwoman Wilhelm.
Aye.
Alderman Mayor.
No.
Alderman Dandria.
Aye.
4 ayes, 2 noes, no absent, no abstentions, motion carries. G9 on page 147 is request to pay stormwater water reviews related to 9611 South 58th Street. Mr. Morrow?
So historically, the city does not get involved in private property drainage issues. This is a project that the Board of Public Works discussed in detail. Considering the history, they decided this one might be worthwhile. And the situation is that Crohn's, as you know, built a new facility. They had a stormwater project. It was fully in compliance with all state, local, federal requirements. And as a process of that, just because of the way storm detention basins operate, they discharge a greater volume of water over a longer period of time at a slower rate. And that was causing some problems downstream before it got to a city facility. And so because Crohn's is spending a lot of their own money doing this, they asked the city if we would forgive the consultant fees, which is probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of about $3,000 when all said and done. As with anyone else who does a project, we have consultants review make sure all the numbers are correct, and that's what they're asking the city to cover.
And this $3,000 would come out of those water funds?
It would come out of the engineering funds. We have some money there to pay for consultants. The difference is we would just not be reimbursed as we typically are.
Is there a motion regarding this matter?
So moved.
Second.
This is moved to not go for reimbursement.
You want to go A?
Option A, right?
Yes.
Alderman Barber?
Yes.
Option A.
Yes, ma'am.
Madam Clerk?
Alderman Dandria.
Aye.
Alderman Mayor.
Aye.
Alderwoman Wilhelm.
Aye.
Alderwoman Hanneman.
Aye.
Alderman Barber.
Aye.
Alderman Nelson.
Aye. Motion carries, 6 ayes, no noes, no absent, no abstentions. Please pass this one. G10, page 149, 29 new chairs.
So moved.
And a pillow?
Who's gonna second it?
Second.
Let's do this loud and proud, please. Madam Clerk?
Alderman Nelson.
Aye.
Alderman Barber.
Aye.
Alderwoman Hanneman.
Aye.
Alderwoman Wilhelm.
Aye.
Alderman Mayor.
Aye.
Alderman Dandria.
Aye.
Motion carries. 6 ayes, no noes, no absent, no abstentions. No new chairs. Thank you. G11 on page 153 is a resolution signed temporary grading easement for 8003 South 68th Street.
So move option A.
I'll second.
Discussion. Madam Clerk?
Alderman Dandria. Alderman Mayor,
Aye.
Alderwoman Wilhelm,
Aye.
Alderwoman Hanneman,
Aye.
Alderman Barber,
Aye.
Alderman Nelson.
Aye. Motion carries, 6 ayes, no noes, no absence, no abstentions. G12 on page 165 is granted gas and electric easement to Webco for the city-owned parcel at 3548 West County Line Road.
So moved. Option
I'll second.
I know in the description it says County Line and Drexel Avenue, the two do not intersect.
No.
A. Yeah.
And it's west-south County Line Road.
Madam Clerk?
Alderman Dandria,
Aye.
Alderman Mayor,
Aye.
Alderwoman Wilhelm,
Aye.
Alderwoman Hanneman,
Aye.
Alderman Barber,
Aye.
Alderman Nelson.
Aye. Motion carries, 6 ayes, no noes, no absent, no abstentions. G13 on 173, request to bid for demolition of an abandoned home at 3548 West County Line Road, west-south County Line Road.
So moved.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Discussion?
Mayor?
Alderman Nelson, then Alderman Wilhelm.
Was this 25,000, or was this the whole demolition project brought in initially, or was this something that just came up after the fact?
We've anticipated this expenditure for some time, where we've been providing, budgets for the TID. So not sure how to answer this. As discussed, we made it clear that this was the expenditure when we were looking for purchasing property.
So we anticipated it?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Alderman Wilhelm?
Well, similar question, so we're going to pay $25,000 or something to tear down a building that belonged to a developer previously?
That is correct.
Check with the chief, see if they want to burn.
I did, with the COVID issues, and they're
Got it.
limiting training right now.
Madam Clerk?
Oh, let me make sure of that.
Alderman Nelson,
Aye.
Alderman Barber.
Aye.
Alderwoman Hanneman,
Aye.
Alderwoman Wilhelm,
Aye.
Alderman Mayor,
Aye.
Alderman Dandria.
Aye.
Motion carries, 6 ayes, no noes, no absent, no abstentions. G14 on 175, notice to waive late fees and can make other concessions for water and sewer utilities in accordance with Tony Evers' number 11.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
B.
Option A?
No action.
No.
Adam.
A item is no action.
We've historically done this, but it could be significant expenditure this year, so I just wanna make you aware of it. If you want us to not do it, for sewers, we could possibly take that course, but it'd be extremely excessive on staff time.
Your motion is placed on file. Motion is placed on file. Let's just do a voice vote on this. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. G15 on page 189, direct staff to prepare a 2020 budget amendment, capital outlay, equipment replacement, street improvement, capital improvement, to reduce $1 million landfill siting resources and remove selected projects from the 2020 capital funds, or to increase note proceeds. Mr. Ratzenberg with the happy news.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The council action sheet gives you some background information. Included in the 2020 budget for the city, we included $2,252,000 of landfill siting revenues expected for the current year, and an additional $458,000 of these revenues into the general fund. The $2,200,000 was in the capital funds. It now would appear that these funds will not arrive this year. And at the bottom of page 188 or 189 of your packet is a graph showing the monthly revenues that have been coming in over time. And when the 2020 budget was put together, we were operating in the nearly $3 million range for this revenue source. and since November of last year, that revenue source has declined. When staff spoke with the operator of the landfill, they indicated that two things were happening. One, they had been directing materials to Franklin rather than their Menominee Falls operations because there was activity going on in the Menominee Falls operation that precluded them from sending material there. And secondly, they just felt that some materials weren't coming in because the market had changed. And these discussions took place prior to the health emergency. And they said that we are now currently operating in the $150,000 a month range, so we're probably in the $2 million a year range in terms of revenues. The most recent month revenue came in after this was prepared and was in the $160,000, so it's still at that reduced level. But we have not yet seen what the revenues are going to be once the public health emergency begins to take place and what's going on with it. On page 190 of your packet, we've indicated how much of the landfill siting revenues represents of the total revenue source within any particular fund. And you'll note there that the landfill siting revenues are significant portions of the capital funds. And that was a change that was made with the 2020 budget. Typically, the 3 of the 4 capital funds in prior years had depended upon tax levy for a significant portion of their revenues. But given the expected increase in landfill siting revenues for 2020, those tax levy revenue resources were dedicated back to the general fund to deal with operations. Now that those funds aren't going to arrive, some decisions will have to be made. And if you then begin to take a look at the analysis on page 191 of your action sheet, there's discussions of each of the funds and their ability to absorb changes in those revenue streams. My office is making the recommendation to the Common Council that half of the landfill siting revenues dedicated to the general fund be removed. So instead of $438,000, it'd be only $238,000 because the general fund can pretty much absorb some of that, especially given the surplus that occurred last year. The library fund receives a very small amount of these allocations. 2020 was the first year that they receive any of those revenues, but their revenues are very thin on their operating levels, so we're not recommending any change to that. Capital Outlay Fund, as you noted earlier, a significant portion of their revenues, that fund's revenues are landfill siting related. There was nearly $300,000 of tax levy indicated there. To date, the Common Council has already approved a number of major capital outlay expenditures, most notably the 3 police vehicles. So most of the funds in this fund has now been exhausted, and it'll be relying on fund balance until the landfill siting revenues arrive. The Equipment Replacement Fund is a fund that has been operating with a structural deficit. By that we mean that the resources into that fund on an annual basis are less than what is required to acquire the equipment, but the fund does have a significant balance in it, and we can continue to rely on that for a year or two. When there are a number of significant police or fire vehicles that are scheduled to be acquired in 2 or 3 years, then the city will likely have to borrow money to deal with that because we will exhaust that fund. But that's a problem that exists in the future and not in the current year. Street Improvement Fund has been, again, has significant reliance on landfill siting revenues, and we're recommending that they continue to rely on that and have very small reduction in those revenues. The contract for the Street Improvement Fund has already been let, so we've spent that money even though we haven't received it yet. So the last fund that's involved here is the Capital Improvement Fund. Capital Improvement Fund is the capital fund that deals with major projects within the city. And the significant resource into this fund comes from either new debt that the city might take on, that's the principal resource. Second resource has been landfill siting fees over the years. And then there would be support from the development fund and the utility development fund as projects qualify for those resources. So at the top of page 192, staff is making, giving you an either-or choice. One of the choices that the council could do is to replace the expected shortfall in landfill siting revenues identified at about $542,000 in the capital improvement fund with debt proceeds. There were no new debt planned for this fund in the current year. But you obviously could amend your budget to anticipate that, and we could borrow that $540,000 to fund the projects. Alternatively, you could choose to not spend some of the money that was appropriated in that fund, because it's not those projects will not be funded now, and those are possible alternatives. Staff has made some recommendations to you on some projects that you might eliminate. On page 193 of your packet is the current 2020 budget for the capital improvement fund. Staff is recommending that half of the parkland acquisition funds of $550,000 supported by $247,000 of park impact fees, so $300,000 was to be supplied by landfill siting. Staff is recommending you cut that in half, which would still allow you to acquire some parkland this year and use up some park impact fees. There was an overflow parking project at Kayla's Playground, which would have used $130,000 of landfill siting fees. That project hasn't yet been approved by the Common Council. So if you chose not to do that, that would be one of the items then that we would not need to borrow for. Further on down, there were trails and bicycle routes and linkages, as well as a developer grant totaling about $95,000 worth of fees. That's another project which has not had any approval by Common Council as yet, so you could not do that project and save those funds. There are two other projects that are listed here. One is a street improvement on South 50th Street for $100,000. That was in last year's capital improvement program and is again in this year's program. But as of yet, the Common Council has not approved any action on that, although there have been motions. Staff has not taken any action on those projects. Lastly, there is a contingency in this fund that originally budgeted $175,000. To date, the Common Council has appropriated $46,000 of those funds, leaving you about $130,000. And staff is recommending that you cut that remaining piece in half. So you would still have $65,000 of contingency that would be available to you for the balance of the year, 8 months to go yet, and still to use some items. That would provide you the $540,000 of shortfall that staff has identified. So you have an either or, and obviously council may choose that there are other projects that you wish to consider modifying. Be happy to entertain any questions if you have them.
Alderman Nelson.
Mr. Rutherford, looking at item under number 6, E. Edward 50th Street improvements, if that's pulled out, will that have any negative impact on the Marquette project?
I would direct you to engineering for that, I don't know.
Those are related projects because the developer, so Marquette involves two developers. I'm gonna call them north side, south side.
Yep, north-south.
If the north side develops, 50th Street is really needs to be improved. So there's also a related water main project there too.
Thank you.
Alderman Tander.
Paul, okay, we consider parks, but we've got impact fees. Where are we on our balancing act in regards to our emergency of needing to have a project for matching funds to utilize some of our park impact fees? Or we may be in jeopardy of having a major issue of having to refund.
If the recommended reductions in park expenditures are taken here, it is highly likely that park impact fees will be rebated by the end of the year.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rosenberg. That's even better news.
Alderman, I can't print money.
No. I know, and, you know, in light of everything that's going on with COVID, the last thing that would make sense is to put the parking lot in Kayla's, because we're not gonna really need it in, at this point. But, I'm also weighing another issue that we've got out there.
I understand that, Alderman, and I need for you to understand that the $1 million reduction in the landfill siting fees is our best estimate here in the month of April, with 8 months to go and a number of significant unknowns. It is possible that before the end of the year, we'll come back at you and say, we've got even a bigger shortfall and have to make some further difficult decisions.
Is there a possibility that we could get an extension on forgiveness of not using the parking impact fees?
The city has already used all of the statutory availability for that purpose.
Okay, so we can't get it dealt with. Okay, thank you. You know, do you need an answer today?
No.
Okay.
Mayor?
Alderman Willem.
Well, in looking at all the capital improvement projects, the one that has potential to bring income into the city are the development projects that could take place around the Marquette Avenue extension. If we cut the item E, 50th Street improvement from $100,000, which is the access road for the development project, then they can't move forward with the project, which means no project, no right-of-way for Marquette Avenue, which has a motion already approved by the council to move forward and go out to bid on that project. So while it says uncommitted project, it's an approved project, and we have a motion to go out for bid, we just haven't done it yet. So I would not suggest taking away one of our future revenue sources at this point yet. I would suggest that maybe cutting it by $25,000 and also cutting the section from Pleasant View School to 49th Street by $15,000, because if you're going to cut one area that's going to allow the development, you might as well cut the other one that's going to allow development. And then taking the equipment replacement fund balance, which is $2,188,000, and moving that over by $60,000. So you'd have 50, 25, 15, you'd have 100,000, and you would still be able to possibly, if the projects move forward, create development that could bring tax revenue to the city. That would be my suggestion. I don't have any problem with the other ones. If we have to on parking tax fees, there's always a borrowing option. I know we don't like to do that, but I'd rather have that hanging out there for a park that we really don't even need to add more people to at this point, than cutting off our arms for future income from housing that could come in for development.
Has finance seen this?
Has financing,
Finance committee seen this?
no, they've had discussions about the shortfall in the landfill siting revenues, but they have not seen this proposal.
I'd like their recommendation. You have a comment.
Another option that might be available to the council, which I can certainly take to the finance committee, there is a $500,000 security, police and city hall security appropriation, which was going to be funded by a transfer out of the general fund. You could redirect 100,000 of that appropriation to, so that you could retain the 50th Street project. So that would just mean there'd be less money available to deal with the security issues at the police headquarters and the city hall.
Alderman Dandridge.
Then what I'd like to do is just make a motion to hold this over to the next meeting until finance can look at this next week, because we've got 3 alder people on that committee that we can scrubbed through it. Alderwoman Wilhelm, I believe you're on that committee. Nope, she's not on it. Alderwoman Hanneman is. So we can go through it and, with the help of Ms. Rothenberg, come up with a solution to make a recommendation to the common council.
Strong.
Second that.
And that'd be a strong recommendation. I don't want any mamby-pamby stuff.
No.
Not that they would have, but
No, I
let's have
totally agree.
dollars and cents.
No, yes. Television.
All right.
Second.
Mayor?
Alderman Wilhelm.
Okay. Well, I'd like the members that are appointed to the finance committee to take my suggestion for where those cuts could come from to leave that development project intact. I'd like that to be part of their review process if they can't find any other method to cover that.
Well, they all heard you.
Yes, so none of,
That's fine.
Ms. Wilhelm?
All those, well, we can do this voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Question, Mayor, I got one point I'd like to make.
Alderman Mayor.
I would like to know really what got us here, and this is more of a rhetorical statement. The landfill is a business. They knew they were going to make some of these decisions early on. I almost feel like they were kind of not being totally honest with us when they were telling us reporting the fees and things for the year, their projections. I understand some might be the economy. None of it's COVID yet, but they had noticed some of this is coming when they move their operations more to Menominee Falls. I just feel like they took advantage of us, and I may be totally wrong, and I apologize if I am, but I hope we hold their feet to the fire in the future.
So noted.
Mayor, I'd also like to make one other point regarding the capital improvement for the item E, 50th Street improvements.
Of course.
Typically, that would be a street improvement because it is an existing city road with houses already on it that probably been there for, I don't know, 50 years or something. And we would be improving that road. It's not an actual rebuild of the road, so maybe it should be listed under street improvement item 5. That might be something else to consider. Thank you.
Well, okay, but the problem still exists that the dollars don't. So, you know,
We'll talk about it.
tomato, you know. Okay, so the motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor of the motion to refer to finance for a firm commitment, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. G16, on page 195, motion to purchase BS&A's community development complaint software. Jim, we need to talk about this and an interface with the clerk's office. Is there a motion to authorize the purchase of BS&A's software?
So move.
Mayor?
Hold it, 1 second. Is there a second? Is there a second to this?
I'll second.
We got 2 seconds. Alderman Wilhelm.
I can only speculate, is this the Community Development Enterprise Resource Program listed in the previous item for $225,000?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
You want to give us the quick run through, Jim?
What we're looking at right now is a replacement for Govern. This is as indicated by the 2020 budget. We're looking at breaking this down into the first 2 parts. The first part we're already working on right now, and the contract has been signed through BS&A. First, turning around and moving all of the water utility billing out of Govern and moving it as a new module within BS&A. That'll allow finally the water utility billing software to directly integrate with the finance and the accounting software, and also to turn around and make all the bill payments viewable online. The next phase of this project is to take all the rest of the portions of what's in Govern, which will be all your parcel management, all your building management, the land management features, licensing, permitting, building inspections, and zoning and compliance. That also will then be moved into the BSNA as a separate module, and then also integrated once again with the finance system, and then brought into the BSNA online portal, where we can then turn around and view a lot of government records directly online through their portal.
Alderman Dandridge.
Is any of this covered under public works?
Under Public Works?
Meaning, would another department cover, would we be getting any funding support from water utility or anything like that?
It would only be through additional revenues that they would turn around and get. I mean, they're directly, IT doesn't turn around and get any sourcing directly for it.
Is this something that we have to approve today, or can we wait for our discussion in finance, in the following week? And bring it to,
You're asking the wrong guy the wrong question. You're asking the wrong guy the
I
right
know,
question.
Paul's coming in, so.
Alderman, on your first question, the water and sewer utility are fully funding the utility management software that we referred to earlier.
Okay.
But in that this particular software component or module is supporting the building inspection department, as well as some engineering and the planning department, which they were recently notified of, that there's a significant planning component to this module that would be supported by the general fund and but therefore by the city. So this is all city financing.
Ms. Ruthenberg, are we already under contract on this?
We are under contract for the utility billing software, and have they begun the process of converting over. We have been using the BSNA software for a number of financial modules since 2013. So this would be a further integration of all of our modules into one module that speaks to itself, and it will make a number of processes more efficient.
Are we committed to our contract to move forward on this?
No, this would be the commitment
Signed, okay.
This evening. And maybe Jim wants to comment on this, but I've had a number of conversations with BSNA on this particular piece. This module is one of the more difficult modules for them to convert because of all of the electronic files in the planning department. And currently there is at least a 6-month waiting period once they get a signed contract to get into their schedule. And then there's a significant conversion piece. So this is going to be a long-term project.
I realize that, and I know we've got a strong commitment with BSNA, and it's been working phenomenally for the last 6-7 years. I'm just wondering, can we wait for a couple weeks on this, or do we have to make a decision today?
There's no financial reason why you have to make a decision today.
It just allows you to get on their project schedule earlier. If you wanted to turn around and wait, because we are running behind schedule anyways on this, if you did want to wait for 2 weeks or another period, it wouldn't be a dramatic setback.
Is there a motion to table till the next common council meeting? Oh,
So moved.
Wait. Is there a
I'll,
withdraw your motion?
I'll,
Margaret does the motion.
did I have?
You seconded it.
Oh, yeah, I did second it, yeah. I'll withdraw my second.
Is there a motion to table this till the next council meeting?
So moved.
Second.
In the meantime, we'll get you some more information on timing and all that.
Correct.
All those in favor of the table?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Vouchers and payroll. Since, license committee's got to meet and pick somebody who I get to pick on from here on out, so that's good. Okay, vouchers and payroll. Is there a motion approving the following city vouchers on any date of April 16, 2020, in the amount of $1,330,172.07, and payroll dated April 10, 2020, in the amount of $393,725.67, and payments to various payroll deductions in the amount of $244,021.95 plus city matching payments, and estimated payroll dated April 24, 2020, in the amount of $412,000, and payments to various payroll deductions estimated at $441,000 plus city matching payments, and release of payments to Knight Berry in the amount of $2,036,763.71, and property tax vouchers with an ending date of April 16, 2020, 2020 in the amount of $6,790,553.67, and the use of investment funds for tax settlements of $5,867,154.16. Madam Clerk, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Madam Clerk.
Alderman D'Andrea.
Aye.
Alderman Mayor. Alderman Mayor.
Aye.
Alderwoman Wilhelm.
Aye.
Alderwoman Hanneman.
Aye.
Alderman Barber.
Aye.
Alderman Nelson.
Aye. Motion carries, 6 ayes, no noes, no absent, no abstentions. Alderman Hamlin, is there a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. You made it. And guess what? No Hamiltons.
Glenn?
Good.
Has left